Welcome to Amsterdam, quite possibly the most photogenic place in the world. What many people might not know about it is that Amsterdam also has an extremely active and vibrant community of writers who are writing in English. Amsterdam has attracted writers from all over the world and continues to inspire like few other places ever have before. I'm Bob Brager, and welcome to my adopted home city. The Amsterdam Writers Platform has been created to introduce to you the writers who either live and work in this city or those who have been inspired by Amsterdam. Hi everybody, and welcome to this edition of Amsterdam Writers Platform. We're here at the heart of Amsterdam, the Vondelpark, 120 acres of green, fragrant parkland that every Amsterdammer knows, uses, and loves. And it's a park that is central to the story that we're going to talk about today. Our writer comes originally from upstate New York. He studied drama at Syracuse University. He worked in New York City for years as an actor in film and on stage. He appeared with Madonna in the 1985 movie Desperately Seeking Susan, and then he came to live in Amsterdam. And we're going to find out why, and we're going to find out more about his book. Welcome, David Swatling, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, Bob, for having me, Bob.
You're welcome. We have a tradition, a new tradition on Amsterdam Writers Platform. We begin every episode with a glass of wine. Would you like some wine, David?
That would be perfect. I mean, Vondelpark, a glass of wine, that's how Amsterdamers do it.
That's exactly right. You, thank you.
I confess, I've done some bad things in my life. Some very bad things. But I never killed anyone. I swear. The Dutch cops weren't seeing it that way. Yes, I was homeless in '95. Yeah, living in my Jeep. Yes. With my dog, Calvin. Yes. I was there, in the park, with the dog. Yes, all of that's true. But I never saw the dead guy. I never knew him. I sure as hell didn't kill anybody. I made it all up. That's what writers do. We make shit up. If you've got any evidence, book me. Yeah, I was guilty, all right. Guilty as sin. Guilty of fiction in the first degree.
So, David, let's talk about the book.
Okay.
Calvin's Head.
Calvin's Head.
What was the head, David?
Well, it's clear there's kind of a double meaning to the book, because part of the book takes place inside Calvin's head. Calvin is a dog.
Yes.
And on the other hand, there is this murder victim. So there is another kind of head as well.
That's right.
Yeah. So
That's right.
These two things come together.
That's right. And we don't want to talk too much about the plot, because this is a book that relies on surprise to some extent. But let's talk about the book. I read this book very carefully over the weekend. I have to tell you something, David. I never read crime fiction. It's not a genre I'm attracted to. I don't think I've hardly read any in my life. I loved this book.
Oh, well, I'm glad.
I was engaged in this book at every moment. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, fantastic.
Because the story is so real and yet so surprising. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, actually, part of the idea came from an event here in Vondelpark.
Yes.
Back in 1995,
Yes.
I was homeless, living in my Jeep with my dog.
Oh gosh.
Long story. No, much
You
more.
came from New York to be homeless here
No,
with your Jeep and
I'd
your
been
dog?
living here for 10 years.
Yes?
And I left my apartment thinking, oh, I'll be able to get another place.
Yeah.
And I just stupidly didn't realize how difficult that was going to be.
Right.
So during the summer, I was basically living in my Jeep with
Right.
the dog and
Right.
a few belongings.
Yeah.
And so, we're wandering around the park one day.
Here.
And
You're parked.
this
you're
park,
parked.
yeah,
you're-
Bundle Park. That was,
and, and the car was parked here.
on the side over on that side over there,
Uh-huh.
the Willems Park, or whatever
Right.
it is.
Right.
And we came across a crime scene. There was a crowd of people around the pond, just on the other side of the rose garden over there, and there were divers in the pond and police talking to people and
Right.
crime scene tape. And I said
Right.
to somebody, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Somebody's dog
Yeah.
found this garbage bag in the pond,
Yeah.
and inside was a human head."
No.
Yes. So
It's a real story.
yeah,
There was a human head.
This is absolutely true, and I all I thought at the time was, thank God, not my dog.
Yeah.
Because Calvin was a big white golden retriever,
Yeah.
loved pulling stuff out of the water.
Right.
And I never heard anything more about it,
Right.
but I couldn't get the image out of my head, so that's where the story began. I began to think, what if it had been my dog?
Right.
What if I recognized the victim?
Uh-huh.
And instead of telling the police what I know, move into his house.
Right.
Because I'm homeless.
Right.
And that's when things will get weird.
Wow. Well, that's just the beginning of the story.
Yeah, this is the very
I mean,
beginning
the
of the
story has plots and turns on every page that are just gripping.
Yeah.
Absolutely gripping. And the dog is gripping. The dog has a personality that you captured in your writing. I've never seen dog talk written. People who have and love their dogs know that the dogs are saying stuff to them. Because dogs communicate. They want things. They have things they want to say. You actually captured that in the book. I think you invented a new kind of writing for the dog.
Well, I had to be careful because, I'm not really a big fan of anthropomorphizing animals,
Yes.
turning them into humans.
Yes.
But that is the way people treat their dogs. I
Yes.
mean, I had communication with my dog. He didn't actually say words,
Yeah.
but I knew what he was saying
Right.
when he was looking at me.
Right.
So there is, on one hand, there are those things that the main character imagines the dog is saying to
That's
him.
right.
But on the other hand, there is the dog's point of view.
Yes.
And for that, I didn't want words. I didn't want, him doing monologues. But I developed this kind of poetry,
Right.
dog poetry,
The
as it were.
staccato.
Yeah, the kind of thoughts inside a dog's head when they see
Yes.
things, which all have to do with action verbs and.
You got it right. It really rings true. There's also unique characters that this book involves, and without wanting to spill any secrets, there's this psychopathic killer guy,
Gadget.
Gadget, who is manipulative and kind of sexy and busy. He doesn't want to just kill. He wants to make a production out of this. Where did you get these ideas? I mean, I assume this doesn't come from your personal experience in any way.
No.
Or is there something you want to tell us now?
Well,
for
the
first
thing
time on
is,
camera?
where do you get these ideas? They're in your head.
Yeah.
That's the way the mind works. I mean, I knew from the very beginning that there was going to be a killer involved because there was a body. So
Right.
we had to come up with a killer.
Right.
But in terms of how he developed, it just. One day I was looking at a painting by Van Gogh,
Oh.
and this painting, a murder of crows, I call it.
Yes.
No, it's blackbirds over the wheat field.
I know the painting.
And I
Yes.
thought, I'm going to begin the chapter with that, and I started writing it, and suddenly I realized, it's not the protagonist that's looking at the painting, who's the art history guy.
Yes.
It's the villain. Why is he looking at this painting?
Yeah.
And suddenly, his background started to come out of that. Who his mother was, who had brought him to the museum, what his background was. It just,
So you took your inspiration from a painting
yeah, little bits.
by Vincent van Gogh of black crows over a field, ominous black crows over a field.
Yeah. Well, it just, I don't know. There was something dark in that
Right.
view of that painting.
But just to talk about where you get your inspiration and how you write stuff like this, it's this good. This murder in the Fondle Park that really happened, was back in 1995.
That's right.
This is 2014.
Yeah.
You didn't rush into this book. I mean, was it a process of fits and starts? Did you plan your writing? Was it, how did this come to be?
Well, the idea came shortly after having had that experience of seeing a crime scene.
Yes.
I wrote a couple of chapters back in 1998 for a writers group here in Amsterdam.
Oh, good.
And got some really great response, and they said, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the story, and suddenly something happened in the story, in my head,
Yeah.
that I thought, that's so horrible, I can't write that. I can't, if nobody would want to read that, they
Right.
that would just stop everybody. And I took the few chapters that I had, threw them in a drawer, and I didn't touch them for 13 years.
Right. The thing that's unspeakable, the thing that we think nobody should ever talk about, might actually really have a kernel of value.
Yeah, but I think you also have to be ready to write it.
Yes.
And 13 years ago, I wasn't.
Right.
But suddenly I was. And
That's interesting.
it was very interesting because really that scene happens like about midway through. There's a whole nother half of the story that comes.
Right.
And it's a
Fascinating.
really interesting process.
That's fascinating. So can we just come back to, and I don't mean that you're a psychopathic murderer. Can we just come back to a moment for your coming here from New York?
Uh-huh.
So there you were. You've just been in a major motion picture with Madonna.
Well, now, wait, let's just say I was an extra in a major motion picture.
Okay, but you were on camera. It didn't get cut.
Yeah, that's.
And you were acting in The Village, and I also come from Greenwich Village, so I know exactly where you were coming from. And suddenly you decide to pick up and move to Amsterdam? What was that about?
Well, at the time, in the early 80s in New York City, in the East Village, there
Yeah.
was a lot of trouble you could get into,
Uh-huh.
and some of which is touched on in that film, that Desperately Seeking Susan,
Yeah.
touches on those
And
shady,
you can't get into that
shady
kind of trouble
characters.
here in Amsterdam?
Oh, you could, but I didn't know anybody here.
Oh, I see.
So I had to leave New York. It was more like escape than decision to leave.
Okay.
When somebody raised their hand in a bar and said, anybody want to sublet an apartment in Amsterdam?
Right.
And in 3 weeks I was gone.
Wow.
And because I didn't know anybody here, I thought, okay, I can start fresh, kind of
You
like...
can reinvent yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the great piece of migration,
Yeah.
the opportunity to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, I mean, some people come for love, some people come just to get away.
Exactly, exactly.
That was my case.
And you stayed.
I stayed, well, because what I discovered when I got here was this little English-speaking theater community
Yeah.
of expatriates
Yes.
doing shows in English
Yes.
at about 2 or 3 different theaters.
Yes.
And so actually, Amsterdam brought me back to my creative life.
Yes, you've had a very creative life here for decades now.
Yeah.
You were on radio in the Dutch International Radio Service.
Uh-huh.
You were a producer of cultural programs and documentaries. You've done other radio work. You've written, but now, later in your productive career, shall we say, you have produced your first novel. Is it not too late sometime? Is it possible to start writing later in one's career?
Well, clearly it is, but
Clearly, but
well,
is it harder?
I think it's just a matter of when the time is right for you. I mean,
Yeah.
Everybody has stories, everybody's got ideas,
Yeah.
and some people put them down when they're young, some people save them for later. But I remember when I was doing radio, this is about 20 years ago, I was interviewing P.D. James, great British mystery writer, Baroness of Holland
Oh
Park.
yes, yes.
And I really admired her because she had a whole career as a lawyer and a barrister and a judge and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff before she started writing.
Yes.
So I was interviewing her and I said, I really admired the fact that you started at the age of 40, your writing career, which is how old I was then.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and said, David, it's never too late to start writing.
It's never too late to start writing.
And I just always kept that in my head. And so, once I sort of
That's
retired
wonderful.
from radio and was, 60 years old, I thought, Baroness James said...
No, that should be an inspiration to all of us.
Yeah.
Really, David.
Well,
I want to thank you.
she just had her book published at age 92 last year. So.
Gosh, so there's still hope for
Yeah,
all of us.
absolutely.
And you have another book coming out.
Oh, well, I have another book that I'm writing now.
Oh, I see.
It's on. Hopefully, will be out this time next year.
Okay. Is it another crime?
Well,
mystery?
suspense will be involved, and
Uh-huh.
but I think there may be a ghost.
involved as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
All right. Well, we can look forward to that.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to thank you. It was delightful to chat with you.
You too, Bob. Thanks.
And I want to thank you all for joining us on Amsterdam Writers Platform.